Welcome to the global Warwatch network. Let's get right to it. Russian drone strikes just cut power to Chernobyl for hours, raising fresh fears of a nuclear disaster in Ukraine. But as we're about to see, the immediate crisis at the Zaporizhzhia plant reveals a threat that goes far, far beyond a simple reactor meltdown. That stark warning from Ukraine's president really sets the stage, doesn't it? We are talking about a danger on an almost unimaginable scale. But what is that danger, really? Well, it might not be what you think it is. So our story starts at Europe's largest nuclear power plant, Zaporizhzhia, which has been under Russian military control. And this is where a high-stakes, real-time gamble with nuclear safety is playing out right before our eyes. Okay, so for a nuclear plant to stay safe, it needs one thing more than anything else: a constant, reliable supply of electricity to cool its radioactive fuel. But at Zaporizhzhia, the shelling just keeps cutting the main power lines. This forces the plant onto its absolute last line of defense: old, rickety diesel generators. One expert put it perfectly: it's like a two-engine plane losing an engine. You're in a very, very bad spot. Normally, a plant might need this backup power, once a decade. Zaporizhzhia has been needing it weekly. The odds of a catastrophic failure are just climbing higher and higher. But here's the twist. The biggest, most terrifying risk isn't just a reactor meltdown. No, it's a hidden danger lurking right next door. A threat that holds way more radioactive material and is, in a lot of ways, much more vulnerable. Let's talk about something called spent fuel pools. Every nuclear plant has them. They are basically just giant, deep swimming pools where they stick the used, incredibly radioactive fuel rods to cool down. And here's the kicker. These pools often contain several times more radioactive material than the reactor core itself. Now, how this fuel is stored, that makes all the difference. Originally, the fuel was stored in these open racks with plenty of space around them. That meant air could circulate and cool the fuel even if all the water was somehow lost. But for economic reasons, most plants switched to what's called a high-density racking. They started packing these fuel rods tightly together in sealed steel boxes. Sure, it saves space, it saves money, but it also creates a massive vulnerability. If you lose the cooling water now, these dense packed rods can't air cool. They just get hotter and hotter and hotter. And that brings us to a really terrifying number: 100. If the cooling water is lost from one of these dense packed pools, the fuel can overheat so much that its metal casing actually catches fire. That fire can then trigger a hydrogen explosion powerful enough to blow the roof right off the building. And that would release nearly 100 times more radioactive cesium-137 than a fire in one of the older, safer, low-density pools. And look, this isn't just some theoretical nightmare scenario. To really get what this means, we just have to look at what almost happened at the Fukushima Daiichi plant in Japan back in 2011. So on March 11th, the tsunami wiped out all the power. 4 days later, a hydrogen explosion blew the roof clean off the building around the spent fuel pool at Unit 4. You had this incredibly dangerous material practically sitting out in the open air. With the water boiling away from the fuel zone heat, calculations showed the pool was going to boil completely dry by March 25th, which would have sparked a fire. Even with workers desperately pumping water in, that fuel still should have been exposed by April 8th. Now this slide right here is so important. The map on the left shows the contamination from the reactor meltdowns that we all remember. It was a terrible, terrible disaster. But the map on the right, that shows what would have happened if that spent fuel pool had caught fire. The radioactive plume would have blanketed all of Tokyo. Had the wind been blowing a slightly different direction just a few days earlier, a fire in that one single pool could have forced the relocation of 35 million people. Just let that sink in for a second. The complete evacuation of one of the world's largest cities. So what stopped it? What prevented this unimaginable catastrophe? Was it brilliant engineering? Heroic intervention? Nope. It was pure, dumb luck. This graph tells the whole story. The dotted line shows where the water level should have been, dropping below the fuel, risking a massive fire. The solid line is what actually happened. An unknown, completely unnoticed leak from a nearby water well seeped through a gate, slowly refilling the pool just enough to keep that fuel covered. A random leak saved Tokyo. And you might be thinking, well, that was a one-off thing at Fukushima, right? Wrong. The same high-density storage, the exact same vulnerabilities, they exist at nuclear plants all over the world, including right here in the United States. And a lot of the time, this is the result of very calculated regulatory decisions. Let's just look at the numbers for a second. The U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC, they did their own analysis, and they found that an average fire in a dense-packed U.S. pool would contaminate 10 times the area of Chernobyl. It would displace an average of 3.5 million people. And remember, that's not a worst-case scenario. That is the average.
And the cost? Oh, the NRC estimated that too. The average economic damage from just one of these fires would be over $700 billion. To put that in perspective, that's more than 4 times the cost of Hurricane Katrina. So you have to ask, with these staggering figures, why haven't regulators required plans to move to safer storage? Well, the source material we looked at points to cost-benefit analyses that systematically downplay the risk. These official analyses often just stop counting the consequences beyond a 50-mile radius. They explicitly ignore the threat of terrorism, and they're subject to intense political pressure from the nuclear industry, who, want to keep costs down.
And all of this systemic risk, it brings us right back to the crisis in Ukraine. Because at Zaporizhzhia, you have this underlying danger combined with the unbelievable stress of a war zone.
You see, the last line of defense in any nuclear plant isn't some piece of technology. It's the people running it. But the Ukrainian operators at Zaporizhzhia have been working for months under military occupation. The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency warned that this constant, crushing stress and pressure could easily lead to human error in a situation where there is absolutely zero room for it.
And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? As Britain's ambassador to the UN said, this is Russian roulette. It's a terrifying gamble being taken not just with a nuclear plant, but with the people who are being forced to run it under extreme duress.
So here's the key takeaway. From the near miss we saw at Fukushima to the active, ongoing crisis in Ukraine, the danger from these spent fuel pools is not hypothetical. We've seen just how close we can come to the brink and how a tiny, random leak was all that stood between us and a disaster that would have dwarfed Chernobyl. It leaves us with a really chilling question, doesn't it?
Thank you for taking the time to really understand this critical issue with us.
Your support is what allows us to bring important stories like this to light, so please, if you found this valuable, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the Global Warwatch Network. And we really do want to hear your thoughts on this, so please leave a comment below and join the conversation on our social media channels. You'll find all the links you need down in the description. Thanks again for watching.